Documentation of human culture in its all-pervasive diversities has been one of the preserves of the Asiatic society in terms of possession, preservation, and dissemination of cultural heritage of our country. In course of its long journey in this direction of the mandate placed by its founder president Sir William Jones since 1784, the society has also accumulated huge number of art and artifacts, specimens and objects of various records, including flora, fauna and items of multiple human cultures. The publication of the present album, containing colored drawings of some birds compiled by Dr. Ashok Kanti Sannal, Biological Science Secretary of the Asiatic Society, has been an unique endeavor as part of the dissemination of the precious possession of the Asiatic Society. I hope that this excellent album will be received by the academic communities and the interested people with appreciation.
The Asiatic Society collected various objects of art and antiquities of the very rich culture and tradition of Asia, including flora and fauna, drawn and painted by indigenous artists. These original drawings and paintings are kept with much love and care in the Museum of the Society. Moreover, these works are not merely documentation, but they are highly creative miniature paintings and works of art of the time by its own right. Being an artist myself, I feel it is quite necessary for me to make a humble appreciation of the works, numbering 82 as printed in the album, of bird paintings and drawings done about 200 years ago when photography was not invented. Perhaps the artist had to become an ornithologist by circumstances to study the total habit of the species in details and come back to his studio or workplace to immediately capture the subject perfectly till the memory is very fresh. We become spellbound to observe that the softness of the feathers, bony character of legs and paws, with nails, different type of beaks of fine mustaches, glittering eyes, and also their nest and eggs. All these works maintained highly aesthetic quality of masterly work. Unfortunately, we do not know the names of the artists, but very likely the artists were of indigenous origin. Like the famous bird painter Ustad Mansoor in Mughal court, I am thankful to Dr. Ashok Kanti Sannal, Biological Secretary of the Society, who has very kindly compiled them in book form. I wish his grand effort with path-making success.
Ladies and gentlemen, very good afternoon to everybody. It's the day of happiness for the 237 years old Asiatic Society Kolkata for releasing e-version of an album containing drawings of birds, which are a small part of the hundreds of treasures of artistic drawings drawn by the Indian artists more than 200 years ago. The drawings drawn during 1810 to 1815 are still preserved in the Museum of the Asiatic Society, Kolkata. The present album, named Flying Feathers, is a unique collection of drawings of birds drawn by the Indian artists at the initiative of Dr. Francis
Buchanan,
Hamilton, the surgeon of Lord Wellesley, the then Governor General of the Government of India. The album documents 85 drawings of bird figures distributed over 28 families, 40 genera, and 60 species. For each of them, information related to salient characters and other features have been incorporated. We hope the album will be an authentic document depicting highly precise artistic acumen of Indian artists in the early
19th
century. The print version of the album will be available shortly. In this connection, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to Dr. Satyabrata Chakraborty, the General Secretary, and Dr. Ramkrishna Chatterjee, Publication Secretary of the Asiatic Society, Kolkata, for their keen interest in publishing the album. I am also grateful to late Kushal Mukhopadhyay and Dr. Rudra Prasad Das for extending help in identification of the bird drawings. Ladies and gentlemen, I am also happy to inform that Sri Somen Mitra, IPS, Additional Director General of Police Training, Government of West Bengal, and an ardent nature lover, has kindly accepted our invitation to kindly release the album. I, on behalf of the Asiatic Society and on my own behalf, express our sincere thanks for kindly accepting our invitation, and we heartily welcome Mr. Mitra in the Asiatic Society. Without taking any more time, I request Sri Mitra to release the album and say a few words on his feelings on this occasion. Sri Mitra, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my proud privilege to launch Flying Feathers by Dr. Ashok Kanti Shannal. I thank the Asiatic Society for giving me this opportunity to launch this book of drawings from the Francis Buchanan collection. Buchanan spent a lot of time documenting the natural history of 19th century India from Lat Bagan, Barakpur, which is now the training academy of the state police, of which I am presently in charge. I also congratulate Dr. Shannal for bringing out this collection for those interested in natural history. By the end of the 18th century, the company realized the economic value of research into natural history. The first real step was the establishment of botanic gardens, the largest being the one started by Colonel Robert Kidd in Shibpur. Others who contributed immensely include Dr. William Roxburgh, Dr. Nathaniel Wallich, Dr. John Forbes Royal, Dr. William Griffith, and William Gibbons. The second step was the establishment of an institution for promotion of natural history of India, with a menagerie and aviary at Barakpur by Lord Wellesley in 1804. This institution was placed under the supervision of Dr. Francis Buchanan, who was incidentally the personal physician of the Governor General. Civil and military officers all over India were directed to send specimens of animals and birds to Barakpur for Dr. Buchanan to sketch and document them. In 1805, Wellesley was recalled, and Buchanan, after a year, was transferred out to the districts on survey work. Later, when the Governor General, the Earl of Moira, instructed Buchanan in 1815 to leave all the natural history and survey drawings in India, a number of zoological drawings from Barakpur were handed over to the British. The remainder, comprising 226 Buchanan drawings in watercolor and pencil, depicting 169 birds, were sent to the Asiatic Society in 1842. British artists rarely came to India to do natural history paintings, and thus the majority of the artists were Indians, though they remained anonymous. However, we get a few names like Sheikh Zainuddin, Mirza Sanghi Beg, and Bhavani Das, who were prominent natural history artists. These drawings, mainly executed by Indian artists for British collectors, have been designated by many as company school art or Patna painting or Firangi art or even Indian export art. But the fact remains that it was a collaboration between the British and the Indians in the field of documenting the natural history of colonial India. I once again thank the Asiatic Society for inviting me on this occasion and Dr. Sanyal for bringing out this informative book. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mitro, for releasing the e-version of the album Flying Feathers and your kind and inspiring words. Thank you once again, sir. Now the birds are flying, and we will be going to the home of Royal Bengal tiger, the Sundarbans. The Sundarbans are a part of the world's largest delta formed by the mighty rivers Ganga, Brahmaputra and Meghna. Situated on the lower end of the Gangetic West Bengal, the Sundarbans is crisscrossed by hundreds of creeks and tributaries. It is one of the most attractive and alluring places remaining on earth, a truly undiscovered paradise and a bonanza for nature lovers. About 200 years ago, the Sundarbans was measured to be of about 16,700 square kilometers. Now, about two-thirds of the forest lies in Bangladesh. The Sundarbans is famous for its charismatic inhabitant, the great Royal Bengal tiger. The unique mangrove ecosystem in the Sundarbans is very rich in biodiversity of special interest. Today, we have with us Dr. Subrot Mukherjee, who is an IFS officer of 1985 batch, with 35 years of his experience as forester in the government of West Bengal. He got the opportunity to serve as the Deputy Field Director and also as the Field Director of the Sundarban Tiger Reserves. Recently, a book, Demystifying Sundarbans, has been written by Dr. Mukherjee and Sri Basudev Pal Majumdar. While discussing about the books, the vast experience of Dr. Mukherjee on the Sundarbans, I was interested to know about the mysteries of Sundarbans, the untold stories of the Sundarbans, which Dr. Mukherjee experienced during his last 2 decades experience in serving in Sundarban. And he readily accepted my proposal to deliver a talk on Sundarbans from the platform of the Asiatic Society. Now, in this connection, I, on behalf of the General Secretary, Dr. Satyabrata Chakraborty, the Asiatic Society, Kolkata, express sincere thanks to Dr. Mukherjee for readily accepting our invitation to deliver a talk on Sundarbans, and on behalf of the Asiatic Society, I welcome Dr. Mukherjee in the society and request him to deliver his talk on Sundarban. Dr. Mukherjee, please.
This presentation, I have given it a name, Demystifying Sundarbans. Sundarbans has always been associated with mystery because this is the area which is not known. Human psychology tends to identify anything unknown as a mysterious. Sundarban always has been defined as a mysterious. Whichever book you read, they will always name it's a mysterious area. Why? Because of its difficult terrain, muddy ground surface, mangrove roots, then tigers in the land, crocodile in the water, and the prohibitive high cost of watercraft and security issues. As Sundarban is not steady, so it remains mysterious. Now we come to what exactly the Sundarban is. The name probably came from Samudraban, or because of the Sundari tree, which botanical name is Heritiera. This area has got 3 international designations. This area is part of global network of biosphere reserve. It is a Ramsar site, both Bangladesh and Indian part. And this is the only area where tiger is found into the mangrove land. Only patch on the face of earth where the tiger is found, the mangrove tiger. If we see the entire Sundarban area, then we find that about 60% area is with Bangladesh and 40% area is with India. Bangladesh part has advantage because it has got the entry of sweet water into the system. So the crop in Bangladesh is better. You can see the heritaria like a sal tree, and there are many areas where you see hordes of deer. With this part of country, there's hardly any entry of sweet water, so the crop etc. is not as good as that of Bangladesh. Now, it has got the 78 plant species, all are not mangroves. They can be classified as true mangroves, back mangroves. But the major species which we have are Exocaria, Heritiera, Cereops, Phoenix, Soneraceae, Avicennia, Rhizophora. The 3 of the major timber species, that is Dhundhul and those are not very good in our part, Dhundul, Heritaria, etc., but they are quite better with good girth, good size in Bangladesh part. Major fauna is we have got the tiger, fishing cat, then in the river we have got the estuarine crocodile. There are many species which were there, but they are no more there, like wild buffalo and Javan rhino. This is what the Sundarbans looks like. It's a area is the tiger reserve area. This is the buffer area of South 24 Parganas. This is very famous, the Banobibi. It is our part of Sundarban culture. This is the only goddess or god who wears shoes. Normally Indian deities, they don't wear shoes. So it shows the influence of Islam on this particular thing. Now there are a few things which are myths about the Sundarbans and which is not well known, but what is the truth? So this entire portion I am giving it to myths and truths. The first is whether Sundarban tiger is smaller than other tiger. Yes. If we compare its bone size with other tigers of central India, then we find that all the bones of Sundarban tiger are small in size, whether it's the radial ulna, femur, BC ratio, and the weight also. Its normal weight of Sundarban tiger male is about 100 kg, whereas if you come see the tiger of the mainland in central India, it comes out to be 150 kg. The reason can be attributed to because it's very agile. There's the land in which it stays always goes through tides. So maybe because of that, and the food also. There is hardly any big size food like buffalo and all the food size is about the 60-70 kgs. So Sundarban tiger is definitely smaller than other tigers of the country. Now the second thing normally spoken about whether Sundarban have saline glands. In reality there is hardly any saline glands. There are some river mouths which got silted up, so the saline water or the tidal water is not getting entry into these areas. So these areas you don't get a very good crop. In fact, when we did the ground truth verification of the blanks which were seen in GIS map or remote sensing maps, we found no, there were trees, but those trees were not of a good girth or good height. Now a lot is spoken about the Bidhwa Palli of Gosaba, that is a widow colony in Gosaba. But if you go to this widow colony, you will find there are some widows, but they are of 80 years, 70, 80 years of age. And hardly anyone you will find whose husband was the tiger victim. Actually, this story starts because there was first settlement in Gosaba. Earlier, people used to go from this area for fishing. As there is a lot of forest-based activities have been controlled, like honey collection, like clear coops. So now people are entering to Sundarban tigers not only go from Gosaba but other areas. So this entire is a story of Bidhwa Palli and it doesn't have any truth into it. How royal is Bengal tiger? Bengal tiger is said as a royal Bengal tiger because Britishers got entry into this country through this Shian rivers. So they used to enjoy the hunting of tigers, and once they enjoyed the hunting of tiger and they ultimately formed the government, took over Indian governance, so they gave it a name of royal and Bengal was the area. But this picture is from the Hyder Ali's thing, not exactly Hyder Ali, it came from the Tipu Sultan. There was a general, Henry Munro, who had a fight with Hyder Ali and Hyder Ali was lost in that fight. So now when Tipu Sultan became the king, he made this type of he presented this in the many areas of his kingdom. This is showing that the son of Henry Munro, this is Hugh Munro, was killed by a tiger in Sundarban. So this became the emblem of Tipu Sultan's kingdom. It is some sort of sarcasm against the Munros. whether mangrove is not ideal place for the tiger. This is normally spoken because we take what is normal for us is also normal for the other animals. In reality, there are 8 subspecies of tiger, and they stay in different kind of areas, right from temperate areas to tropical areas. So this is same true for our Sundarban tiger. And if you see the number of tigers in Sundarban, you find the density is very good. So what is, we tend to say that what is normal for us is also normal for, and for truth is this tiger is well accommodated, adjusted with the mangrove condition, saline condition, and it is surviving very well. Then this is another myth that our Sundarban tigers are the man-eaters. I really don't believe into it, because if you see a captive tiger, then you will find that one captive tiger is given about 12 kgs of meat per day for the 6 days in the week. So that is how a captive male tiger eats about 3,600 kgs of meat per year. But if we see the number of people getting killed by tiger, we will find that nowadays about 6-7 people, or say about 10 people getting killed by the tiger. So one tiger's requirement is also not fulfilled by human being. Yes, the people enter into the Sundarbans and for fishing or for honey collection, and they are helpless, and it is very difficult to walk into this mangrove land, and they find it very difficult to run because walking itself is difficult, so they become the easy prey. This is true for the tigers also. They also find the hunting not as easy, and they cannot run because it's all protecting roots and all. So tiger also found it difficult. We tried many things, like this is an image when we made a clay model and gave it electricity of 12 volt, and we thought that tiger will touch it and get a shock, and if it gets a shock then it will not touch these human beings. But none of these experiments conclusively prove and could help us that tiger, these things can help us in controlling the magic eating tendency of the tigers. Now lastly, whether the Sundarban tigers have territoriality. Probably Sundarban tigers do not have any territoriality, because we undertook a study, it was part of my research work also. When we, for 3 years, we saw the tigers which are coming into different sweetwater pond, and we found that the tiger which is coming in in the month of November, December, it stops coming after 2-3 months. So probably the whole territoriality concept came from the Hendricks study when he tranquilized a tiger and in Bangladesh in 1971, and he released it in some other area, and then he could not monitor that tiger, and he attributed that it is because this particular tiger which was released in the forest was killed by another tiger. But if we see the last 30 years of management of Sundarban Tiger Reserve, we have released about more than 100 state tigers, but we have not come across a single example where the tiger has been killed by another tiger. Secondly, while we are radio collaring these tigers as part of our studies in say 2010-12, then we found that there is no typical territoriality in Sundarban's tiger, because the tigers, they tend to move the larger areas. There is a very typical method of marking a territoriality by urinating. That also probably not possible in Sundarbans because of the tides. Every 6 hours you get a tide. So whole territoriality, as far as I understand, is a trophic concept, the food finding concept, and as Sundarban, the food is a very small, and it is in the water, it is in the land. Food of Sundarban's tiger can be something from the 2 kgs fish to about 60 kgs deer. So probably territoriality is not a concept in Sundarban. The tigers, they move larger area in search of food. So the main 2 activities for which people enter into Sundarbans are the fishing and honey collection, And honey collection is limited in the month of April and May, but we normally tend to say that it's a honey which is the blood-soaked honey, because the number of people killed during honey collection actually gives us hardly any economic benefit when we collect this honey and then market it through West Bengal Forest Development Corporation. Fishing has been a very, it's a very old profession in Sundarban areas, but and till now we have not allowed the mechanized fishing in Tiger Reserve area, although there is a lot of pressure from the people. And the moment we started, then I think the Sundarbans are gone, because there is a food chain, and once it gets disturbed, then it's very difficult to bring it back. This is what we started nylon net fencing, which is very popular and has given us a very good conservation dividends in Indian Sundarbans. When it started initially in mid-90s, then we were ridiculed that how can a fencing work. Initially we started with biological fencing, then we change into RCC's fencing. These fencing has given us very good result. Tiger string have reduced, and it also gives us some sort of protection to the both human being and the tiger. One thing I want to add here, that this is one of the things which gave us very good results, and if this can be copied in Bangladesh part, because it's a very good management practice which should go beyond our country's boundary. Then another thing where we got a very good success, this is the Pataguru Basaga river terrapin, very endemic species. There was no breeding reported for 20-30 years, but what happened in the year 2011, first time the breeding was reported in Sajjan Khali. It was a captive breeding, and we got a lot of help from Madras Crocodile Bank. This success also was seen in Bangladesh, but ours we are continuing with it, and so many river terrapin have been, there have been captive breeding, and there has been a release too. Joint forest management, another thing which has given a very good success. There are about 65 numbers of committees or other villages with which we try to protect our forest area. Interestingly, if we see the northern boundary, this only has got a interface with the villages. So if we have our own friends here, then this human fencing can help us. Definitely it has given us very good results in Sundarban. And the ecotourism, whenever you listen about Sundarban and you want to go and see the areas, there are a lot of works which has been done in Sundarbans, and best thing is the canopy walk in Dobaki. Whole idea of constructing Dobaki as a land-based camp for the protection. It's very difficult to make a land-based camp in Sundarbans, because firstly you have to clear a forest, and this forest are inundated by tides, and you have tiger also in it, and it's very difficult to do construction works using the saline water. You have to bring the sweet water for it, then you have to first dig a tube well, and you have to ensure that people get a water which is suitable for drinking. All these things were tried way back in 1999 when I was the DFD. These are, I think, the two successes of mine when we could do the nylon net fencing and the land-based camps. And finally, as of now, we have got 8 land-based camps in Sundarbans, and these camps are full-fledged camp. There's speedboat, a RCC jetty. Before that, we used to have the wooden jetties, and it is lighted by solar batteries, solar chargers. So it is a very good, well-equipped camp, and these camps are very good because they help us in a protection. You are distributed all over the forest area. This is another thing which should have been copied from Indian Sundarbans in Bangladesh, because once you go and see the camps in Bangladesh, you find there are 2 ponds, one for drinking water and another for bathing and all. and most of the staff, which was our case also, say before about 25 years, then they have the gastroenteritis or water related infections. So they came down because we started getting water from deep tube well in the camps. But yes, a camp construction itself is a very difficult work, and initially even our government was little reluctant on it, and for the first two camps of Dobaki and Chemta, we took the at a particular point we went to the WWF for the help, and the same thing we did for when we started doing the camera trapping, because camera trapping also. So what actually I mean that government, non-government bodies, they must work together and found out a way, because there are hardly any bigger natural this type of areas left, which is like Sundarban is a World Heritage Property. Both India's Sundarbans and Bangladesh Sundarbans since 1989 ourselves. So once we want to protect it, then all of us have to join hands, and when we say joining hands, that means that we must cooperate at every level, economic, intellectual, and every level, so, and with very good honest intention, so that we can really do something for this. These are some of the areas. If you go to Sundarbans, you go to this area: Sajnikali, Sudarnikali, Dobaki, Neti Dhupani, Budi Dabri, Bakhali in this part, Boni camps, and they are beautiful areas. But the problem and limitation is that these areas are only good for the 2 months of or 3 or 4 months of December, January, February, because otherwise the water gets disturbed. But interestingly, in those 4 months, the number of visitors we get in Sundarbans Tiger Reserve is the same number we get in Corbett. But as our entry fees etc. is less, and we don't allow cars cannot be allowed, so their revenue is very high. It is almost 10 times higher of us. Primarily it comes because of the parking of cars and all. Here I would like to conclude. This is the book which we had come up from whatever the work we did for the last 20 years in Sundarbans. And this is the Mysterious Sundarbans, and it not only covers about the Indian Sundarbans, but also covers the part of Bangladesh Sundarbans where we could go and study it. And with that, I will close here. And what I here want to say that Sundarban is the only area in the globe which has got a tiger, which has got a crocodile, which actually conserves and helps us to protect all those cities, Khulna, Calcutta and all. And we need to protect this area. Tigers, I don't think there is protection of tiger probably is not a problem in Sundarbans, because here tiger protects itself. The land is such, the habitat is such, but it's very difficult to hunt. It is very difficult to poach a tiger in Sundarbans. So if there is ever a day comes when we find the last tiger, I'm sure it will be in Sundarban, and I hope it never comes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mukherjee, for your elaborate, lucid, informative lecture on the Sundarbans. I once again thank you, Dr. Mukherjee, for writing the valuable book on Sundarban and delivering a beautiful lecture today. Thanks.